China. China is a problem.
The Brazilian consumer, in fact, has been a solution in many cases, given the influx of Chinese automakers into our market. But make no mistake, for several of the traditional brands, the Chinese competitors are indeed bringing a lot of headaches. And then Toyota, which has the Lexus brand very well established in the world for several decades, especially in the American market, right, where Lexus is a major player. Something like 600,000 cars per year. Here in Brazil, Toyota has kind of always just dragged its feet with Lexus, so to speak, right? They never really invested much in the brand, never really put much effort into the brand's marketing. So much so that Lexus is a brand that's really niche in our market, selling about 2,000 cars per year. It's not much, even for a premium brand where the average ticket is over $500,000. But when we look at BMW, Mercedes and Volvo, those are brands that often sell over 10,000 cars per year. You can include Audi in that list as well. So Toyota is kind of in a tough spot, right? Either they invest and become more aggressive with Lexus's commercial strategy in Brazil, or the brand will end up being pushed out by the Chinese. Especially because what did Lexus used to sell? And now we're going to start talking a bit more about this guy here, the newly launched Lexus RZ. It's the brand's first fully electric vehicle in Brazil. But Lexus, abroad for several decades, and in Brazil in recent years, right? Lexus really sells what the automotive industry barely uses anymore. Refinement, right? Acoustic insulation, thermal insulation, ride comfort, things that many Chinese electric or hybrid cars offer organically due to electrification, right? So the brand needs to look for other advantages to stand out. This guy here, the RZ, let me show you something interesting. It has all-wheel drive, it's yours for 500,000 reais. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. But it's based on the IET-NGA platform, right? Which originated from that Toyota and Subaru joint venture, where Toyota brought the BZ4X to the world, which was Toyota's first electric vehicle. So why am I saying all this? It's, let's say, a previous generation of electric vehicle, right? So much so that the big motor is exposed here. It doesn't even have, for example, a front trunk yet. Like I said, it's got all-wheel drive naturally, right? Because there's an electric motor in the front and another in the back. We're talking about 381 combined horsepower and 54 kg-meters of torque. Inside, it distinguishes itself more from the Chinese models. It's a beautiful place to be, the RZ's interior, right? Very refined materials, very soft leather. The steering wheel has the softest leather I think I've ever felt in a car. The suede here on the doors also stands out. Take a look at the floor mats down there on the floor. This depth here and this softness of the carpet are usually associated with Bentley, with Rolls-Royce, right? But the brand needs to invest in these small differences because at this price point, the competition is tough, right? Yeah, not just among the Chinese ones, but when you look, for example, at the traditional ones, right? You're not too far from an electric Macan here with much more performance. In terms of performance too, right? The Volvo EX40 or EC40 is a smaller car, a little less luxurious in terms of finish. But it's a car that costs around 400,000 reais. It's more powerful, faster, and today it costs about 130,000 reais less, right? Yeah, Lexus needs to look for other elements to differentiate itself. And then, Toyota's commercial policy has been very strong in the benefits that joining the Lexus lineup brings to the consumer, right? We are mainly talking about up to a 10-year warranty, 5 years of 24-hour roadside assistance at no extra cost, and fixed price maintenance throughout the entire ownership of the car, right? So it's much more focused on that peace of mind in after sales, right? As the main differentiator of the brand in the market. Lexus has, some details that really convey sophistication, right? We have Mark Levinson, which is a brand differentiator. And these little buttons here, look, to open the door smoothly. Wow, here in the back seat, I would say this is the car for you to take your new girlfriend's parents out and impress your future father-in-law and mother-in-law. Really, this ultra suede sofa, right? Made of suede with a flat floor, right? After all, it's an electric car, and we're also talking about a large size car, right? It's 4.80 meters long, so the wheelbase is generous here with plenty of legroom. But this combination of suede with the fluffy carpet really brings a level of refinement that you don't find in most rivals in the same price range. But, as I said, the platform already shows some signs of age, right? The cluster there is a bit modest. We'll talk about that in a moment. Even the roof, right? It has a big panoramic roof, but it doesn't open and still has this division in the middle. Anyway, the truth is that Lexus is arriving a bit late to this electric car competition here in Brazil, right? With a previous generation car. For example, the iX3 that's arriving now and the iX60 that's arriving now are cars that offer more onboard technology and better performance and range numbers, right? Here it's 357 kilometers according to Inmetro. The iX60, for example, will arrive with almost 500 kilometers according to Inmetro in the same price range, which makes things a bit complicated for Lexus. But there's no doubt that the car has all the qualities to please the most loyal Lexus fans, or even Toyota fans looking for an upgrade. So, do the following. Get comfortable under the fixed sunroof and let's take a little drive around Florianopolis, the magic island. But how does it drive, Congressman? I'm starting this test on the cobblestone for a reason. Because the RZ's biggest differentiator among the premium electric SUVs flooding our market is how smooth it rides. The car sings. There's an expression in English that I like, which is syrupy, right? Like maple syrup, that pancake syrup, you know? It's often used, sometimes, to describe how a manual gearbox shifts. Honda gearboxes, the best Honda gearboxes, like from the Civic Si, G8 for example, which has a chassis that flexes, but the gearbox is syrupy, right? It slots in perfectly. Yeah, I think the best Portuguese equivalent would be azeitado, right? The ride of the car is smooth when you go over a rough surface. Beautiful palm tree beach here. The suede on this steering wheel, or rather the leather on this steering wheel, reminds me of a Hugo Boss suede jacket I bought about 15 years ago, spending money I didn't have just to look good for my Red Bull job interview. Look, rewind the tape. 20 years ago, we are getting old. Because when you... Whoa! Of course, there is a huge kick here with almost 400 horsepower, over 50 kilograms of torque. But that's not what sets the car apart, right? Any EV, even one well below this price range, gives you that explosive performance. I think it's actually, well, two things. If this is worth it, what I'm going to list now, is it worth 500,000 reais or not? When you can have something similar in terms of performance and sophistication, especially when you look elsewhere, right? If you compare Lexus electric cars with electric cars from BMW and Mercedes, you're talking about similar price ranges, right? When you expand that to include the Chinese brands, then you can reach this level of performance and size for lower prices. But I think what sets this car apart, I'm not sure it's worth the extra 100,000, is this smoothness when driving. Look, passing here, how the suspension compresses, the rebound. It's clear that the chassis is very well tuned to deliver this sense of isolation. And the finish, right? Like I said, the quality of the leather on the steering wheel here, it feels like a caress on your hand. It's that ultra suede, right? The ultra suede, right? Which is the finish on the perforated seats and doors here. Everything is very pleasant to the touch. It's a car that hugs you and does what Lexus has always tried to do. Let's put it that way. Are you going to parallel park now, Kicks? Go ahead, no rush, I'll wait. Yeah, Lexus has always been a car brand when we look at its history, right? The brand lacks recognition or tradition in Brazil, but has been well established for decades in the United States, right? And what does it sell in the American market to the American consumer historically? Oh, that expression didn't even exist back then, right? Today it's trendy. Wow, I took a wrong turn here. Let's go around the block one more time. It sells quiet luxury, right? Which is this kind of luxury, understated to use another English word, but it's luxury that's not flashy, right? I find this very interesting, Brazil, giving our countries extreme economic inequality, right? If you don't know, Brazil, according to the Gini index, which measures economic inequality, is the 8th or 9th most unequal country in the world. South Africa usually tops this ranking, which isn't something to be proud of. Let's put it that way. Yeah, and that sticks with me too. I never forget it. Brazil and Colombia are always neck and neck. The Gini index is around 0.5. I think Brazil is 8th, Colombia is 9th, or maybe the other way around. But I like the car. I've been a Volvo fan for many years, also because of that. I think so, the brand that shows off a little less makes me more comfortable with my Brazilian elite guilt on a daily basis. So Lexus has that, right? It's a more understated brand, but more than that, right? I think it's quite luxury. That's something it never needed to sell in the United States, where they don't have such big inequality problems like we do here. Although inequality is also growing more and more there. They have trillionaires there, don't they? It's a trillion. Imagine a trillion. What do you do with a trillion? But anyway, that's a topic for another podcast. But going back, Lexus has always offered peace of mind, right? That peace of mind, that reliability. And here in the Brazilian market, they keep following that path, right? So that's a big difference for Lexus when you look at the Chinese competitors, right? Let's name names here. So when you're talking about Lexus, you're talking about a 10-year warranty. You're talking about 5 years of free 24-hour roadside assistance. You're talking about fixed price service, right? And it's standardized. So Lexus is going to try to stand out. I think, yes, the car has more personality than the Chinese ones, right? It has a sophisticated, very striking design. The interior design itself, right? It's different. If we were in a Chinese electric car or a mid-size SUV with 400 horsepower here, we'd be looking at two giant identical rectangular screens, right? So the car offers more personality, let's put it that way, and it really provides that after-sales experience. Let's wave to our Lexus friends and take another spin around Florianopolis. This after-sales experience is really based on that peace of mind, right? With this combo of a 10-year warranty, 5 years of assistance, and fixed price maintenance, yeah, is that enough to convince people to pay 100 to 150,000 more? Yeah, I think Lexus ends up bringing to the premium segment a positioning very similar to Toyota's, right? In the mainstream segment, which is the car for the guy who doesn't want to worry, right? Yeah, and still bringing, wow. Let's use the power here to position ourselves better for the exits. Still bringing a bit more personality, a bit more history than the Chinese brands. Where it loses, right, to the main competitors is in the price, no doubt, and even a bit in terms of technology, right? This car here is derived from the platform of the Toyota BZ4X, which was the first one, which was Toyota. We can see the age of the project in a few little things, right? Mainly, I would say, in the cluster, right? The little RAV4 cluster, right? From the previous generation. You can't really see well on camera, right? But the screen is just this here, look. We're discussing warning lights on these two sides. It's not a TFT cluster or large screen, which shows the project's age. But it is a car that, I was saying this before, right? Just to finish my thought. Lexus has always sold this idea of isolation too, right? Of refinement. Yeah, the relentless pursuit of perfection was Lexus's slogan when I lived in the United States. The relentless pursuit of perfection. And the electric one, by itself, right? It already comes with that built in, right? The instant torque, the absence of noise, the absence of vibration. So, with a good suspension setup like Lexus did here, you get in 2026 for 500,000 reais, let's say, $100,000, An experience that 20 years ago you had to pay $1 million to have in a Rolls-Royce V12, right? In terms of isolation, refinement, and comfort. Do you agree? Disagree? Let us know in the comments. Please like this video, it really helps us. Thanks so much. Take care. Big hug. Would you pay $500,000 for this Lexus? Let us know. Thanks.